All right, well, thanks to Foresight and Open Lunar for having me. I'm a first-timer, and first to thank you to everyone here because everybody's been very welcoming, so I appreciate that. My name is Luis Zia. I'm a recovering research professor in bioastronautics from the University of Colorado Boulder and the founder of Jaguar Space. It's a one-person, 9-month-old company. I've had 15 customers, including NASA, so that means I haven't slept much, and that's my excuse if I make silly mistakes here. So I'm going to start with just a very brief intro. And like most space stories, this one starts with scuba diving and bacteria. So I used to be an aerospace engineer living in Florida, and I went scuba diving, and I got an ear infection that became a throat infection. And now in hindsight, the doctors just went wrong in so many ways in the antibiotic doses that they gave me. Long story short is that it killed not only the infectious, the pathogenic bacteria, but it was also killing the good bacteria. For reference, we have about the same amount of cells in our body as bacterial and fungal cells inside and outside of us, and most of them help us in everyday life. So I ended up in the hospital so that I wouldn't completely die. They were going to remove a big piece of my intestine. And fortunately, I still have my intestine complete, and I'm alive, but over 100,000 people a year in the United States alone are part of that statistic, not as fortunate as me, of dying from a bacterial infection that we can no longer cure with antibiotics. As an aerospace engineer, I wonder what can I do to be part of the solution, not the problem. I went to get a PhD in bioastronautics. And as a very naive PhD aerospace engineer student, I started working on payloads, building the bioreactors and everything the astronauts need to do, the crew procedures, all that. But I was working with scientists, and I thought to myself, I don't see any reason for which I couldn't be doing what they're doing. So I transitioned to gravitational microbiology, and 5 years later, and 15 years lifespan less later, I did my PhD on bioastro. I flew my PhD thesis to the space station. And now, fast forward to now, I worked on 25 payloads that have gone to space, including as a principal investigator. The last one I had went around the moon. So the Orion spacecraft in Artemis 1 orbited the moon 3 times. I had 12,000 mutants of yeast in there. I was studying DNA repair mechanisms. And I said yeast, whiskey. So there's a lot of connections with the different conversations we've had here today. And I give that as a context not only for myself, but for the conversation here. And my presentation is very brief. Really, it's 2 slides. One is, why do we even care about access to space? Because the topic is, how do we make this accessible to the next generation, as well as to folks who historically haven't had access to space? And when we go to Thanksgiving dinner or we have conversations with non-space folks and we're that one weird space bug in the family or in the table talking about, oh, space is awesome, and there's always someone thinking that space is like putting money in a suitcase and you put it on top of a rocket and it goes to space and you never see it again. And we tend to give the same examples like GPS. That's a great example of benefits to people on Earth, right? Do you like having Uber? Do you like Google Maps? Well, thanks to space, right? But there's so many more stories that I want to share. I'm going to share only 2, but hopefully it's going to give you ammo for those conversations of explaining the benefits of space. And in the context of this presentation is why it's important that more people have access to space for R&D. And that is that 3rd bullet, benefits of people to Earth, including medical. So among the 25 experiments I worked on, we've flown basic research like human and bull sperm for NASA to determine whether we are indeed going to be able to become a multi-generational species, but more applied ones like cancer research. There's 2 main reasons for which we do cancer research in space. We can build 3-dimensional structures that better resemble a tumor in the human body that then we use as a target when we are testing molecules to see if they can become a drug. And the other one is because we can grow larger crystals of proteins that then we can better identify its structure and determine how to either if it's a target, if it's what's wrong in the human body that needs to be fixed, or the drug. But I'll give here something I've learned now. So after being in academia, I went to business development. I was a senior business development manager at Sierra Space, a company valuing $5 billion. And I learned something during that transition. As an engineer, I always loved units as, newtons, right, or whatever. And as a scientist, nanograms of mRNA or whatever. But I realized that if you want a story to be conveyed properly so that it's received, the unit that really clings the best is dollar, US dollar. That's the unit you want. So I'll give you two examples. One is denosumab. It's called Prolia. This hits home because my mom takes it. This is an osteoporosis drug. And the way it was developed was by flying cohorts of mice to space. It was part of the process. Right now, Amgen makes $4 billion a year selling that. And the biggest one is the best-selling drug on the market, period. And that's Keytruda from Merck. Keytruda is 40% of Merck's revenue. And it just had a big oomph from spaceflight. So Keytruda is a cancer drug, and Merck was about to lose its patent because it's old enough. They sell $25 billion a year in Keytruda. And it has a 19% year-over-year increase. What they did is this is a protein. And the way they manufacture on Earth was very complicated because they didn't know which of two sizes was the particle. So when you see the x-axis is a particle size, and the y-axis is the distribution in a sample, it was bimodal, like a camel. So they didn't know which one was it. By flying it to space, they were able to determine the exact structure of the protein, and now it's a monomodal, and now they know, oh, this is what the protein really is. This is what actually we want. And it translated to 3 changes. One is that for patients, they no longer have to be sitting, having an IV dose for hours and coming back every other week or something, but now it's an IV, it's a shot, like a vaccine. The other one is because they now know the structure, they can store it at lower temperatures, which reduce operational costs. And the third one is that now because they know the structure, they can process it easily on Earth. So that reduces operational costs as well. So those are 2 examples of why it matters. And I'll wrap up with why I started this company to give access to those who historically haven't had access to space, because these kind of ideas live everywhere, not only in the Mercs of the world, not only in developed countries. I'm from Guatemala. I know that's why I migrated here. And I do 2 things here. One is I have a fellowship program to bring students to the US where I train them on how we prepare spaceflight experiments, give them money because I know money is what runs things. And the other one is mentorship, right? Access to my network and other people's networks. But I'll finish with the last part is what I'm doing, for example, who from here is from Latin America? All right. So you know that I'm assuming you know, but space agencies in Latin America, for even those countries that have it, their budgets are minute. They can't even afford to fly a simple payload. So what I'm doing is I call aggregation, customer aggregation. What I do is fly payloads that are shared by, for example, right now I'm talking with the Argentinian, Brazilian, and Mexican space agencies at University in Guatemala, so that they share the cost. Everybody has their own flavor of science in the same payload, and then they share the science. So it's reducing the cost, maximizing the scientific output. And I do it cheaper in 2 ways. I don't build the flight hardware. That's one of the 2, having worked over a dozen years in the implementation side of things, the 2 expensive things are building the hardware and the NASA safety review process. So what I do is I lease it in bulk, so I get it cheaper, and then I streamline the safety review process because I've been doing it for 15 years. I know the do's and don'ts. And by aggregating folks who haven't had access to space, that's what I'm doing with Jaguar, now hopefully giving more people access to it. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for 1 question at least. Go for it.
Hi, Nathan Johnson, lawyer. What challenges do you face with extending these opportunities to non-US persons? I think everybody here, and especially people from backgrounds from outside of the US, know what a burden US export regulations are, especially to spaceflight, the spaceflight experience. So again, opening access, equitable access, what challenges do you face in that regard?
All right. The question is what challenges do I see giving access to non-space people? So I'm still an adjunct professor at CU Boulder. So one thing I do is I bring it from the academic side. It's academic training for the students. And then for the space agencies, it's really not a problem because I am a US company and I fly it as a US company. And really my customers, as long as they're not from a don't fly list, they're good to go.
All right, we're unfortunately at time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.